In the 16th century, all non-noble Englishmen over the age of 6 had to wear a flat cap on a Sunday. The flat cap, beloved of farmers and, latterly, hipsters, has its origins in a truly bizarre English law. In 1571, Parliament passed a law forcing all non-nobles to wear a wool cap on Sundays and holidays. Lawbreakers faced a 3-farthing fine. Parliament passed the officious legislation to boost the domestic wool industry, which found itself in dire straits in 1571. This law was absurd even in its day, and Parliament repealed it in 1597. However, after 26 years, people had grown rather fond of wearing woolen hats. Thus, the law gave birth to the flat cap.
The 16th century, a time when England was under the rule of the Tudor dynasty, a period marked by religious upheaval, the establishment of England as a world power and, strangely enough, the birth of the flat cap. This era was teeming with paradoxes. The monarchy was growing stronger, yet the seeds of revolution were being sown. The church was in turmoil, yet it was a time of great spiritual awakening. The economy was expanding, yet it was also a time of great poverty. Amidst this tumult, one industry was of particular importance: the wool industry. It was a cornerstone of the English economy, providing employment to thousands and contributing to the nation's wealth. But, in 1571, this industry found itself in trouble. Amidst this backdrop, a peculiar law was instituted that would have a lasting impact on English fashion: the law of the flat cap. In 1571, Parliament passed a law that was as ingenious as it was bizarre. This was an era where the lines between fashion and law were blurred, and the humble flat cap was at the center of it all. This law, known as the Act of Parliament for the Preservation of Wool, stipulated that every non-noble male over the age of 6 had to wear a woolen cap on Sundays and holidays. Not just any cap, mind you, it had to be a flat cap. This wasn't a fashion trend or a style choice. This was the law. The punishment for breaking this law? A fine of 3 farthings, a sum that may seem laughably small today but was substantial enough back then to serve as a deterrent. But why, you might ask, did Parliament concern itself with headwear? Well, the answer lies in the state of the English wool industry at the time. In the late 16th century, the wool industry was in a precarious position. Domestic demand was flagging, and the industry was struggling to keep its head above water. Parliament, in all its wisdom, decided to give the industry a much-needed boost. The idea was simple, yet shrewd. By mandating the wearing of woolen flat caps, they would stimulate demand for wool, thus bolstering the industry. So, on Sundays and holidays, streets across England were filled with men and boys sporting woolen flat caps. It was an unusual sight, no doubt, but one that was mandated by law. However, as strange as this law may seem to us today, it served its purpose. The wool industry did see an upturn, and the flat cap became a staple of English attire. So every Sunday and on holidays, Englishmen found themselves donning woolen flat caps, a fashion statement enforced by law. And thus, the flat cap, a symbol of Englishness, was born not out of fashion but out of necessity. Over the course of 26 years, the flat cap became more than just a symbol of compliance. Imagine, if you will, a sea of flat caps across the English countryside every Sunday. From the bustling streets of London to the tranquil meadows of Yorkshire, the flat cap became a ubiquitous sight. What started as a government mandate soon turned into a cultural phenomenon. The English population, non-noble and noble alike, began to adopt the flat cap as a part of their everyday attire. And why wouldn't they? After all, these woolen caps were practical, comfortable, and, let's be honest, quite stylish. The flat cap wasn't just a hat, it was a beacon of English identity, a symbol of the everyman. It was a hat that told a story of resilience and adaptation. The English people, in their unique way, had turned an act of legislation into an act of fashion. Over time, the flat cap began to weave its way into the fabric of English society. It became synonymous with the working class, the men who toiled in the fields and factories. Their sweat and determination soaked into the wool, giving the flat cap a gritty, authentic charm. Yet it wasn't just the working class who fell in love with the flat cap. Nobles too began to incorporate it into their attire, wearing it during hunting expeditions and leisurely outings. The flat cap had bridged social divides, becoming a common thread in a society often characterized by rigid class structures. The flat cap also found its way into literature and art, further cementing its place in English culture. From the gritty depictions of working-class life in Charles Dickens's novels to the pastoral scenes in Thomas Gainsborough's paintings, the flat cap was there, an ever-present symbol of Englishness. Even though it started as a law, the flat cap soon became a beloved part of English attire. It had taken root in the hearts and minds of the people, growing from a symbol of compliance into a symbol of identity. Indeed, the impact of the law was profound, but the cultural significance it spawned was even greater. By 1597, the wool industry had recovered, and the need for the law had diminished. Over a quarter of a century had passed since the introduction of the law that required all non-nobles in England to wear a woolen flat cap on Sundays and holidays. The wool industry, once in dire straits, had bounced back, thanks to the peculiar legislation that had boosted its demand. The law had served its purpose, but its time had come. The Parliament of England, in an act of discernment, decided to repeal the law. The reasons were threefold. Firstly, the wool industry had regained its strength and no longer needed the artificial boost. Secondly, the law had always been a bit of an oddity, even when it was first introduced. It was a relic of a time when the state had to intervene in the most personal of matters, like what people wore on their heads to protect an industry. Lastly, the enforcement of the law had become lax over time, and the fine of 3 farthings was no longer a deterrent. The public reaction to the repeal was mixed. Some had grown rather fond of their woolen hats and continued to wear them out of habit or preference. Others, however, were glad to be rid of the obligation. They saw it as a sign of progress, a step away from the meddling of the state in personal affairs. The law had been in effect for 26 years. A whole generation had grown up knowing nothing but the rule of the woolen flat cap. It had become a part of the English identity, a symbol of the common man. And even though the law was repealed, the flat cap did not disappear. It had taken root in the culture and fashion of the time. And so, the law that gave birth to the flat cap was no more. But the legacy of the flat cap was far from over. The law was gone, but the flat cap remained, deeply ingrained in English culture. When the wool cap law was repealed in the late 16th century, the English populace had become so accustomed to the flat cap that they continued to wear it, law or no law. Over the course of 26 years, the flat cap had evolved from a symbol of enforced conformity into a popular and beloved headgear. Over the subsequent centuries, the flat cap transcended its humble beginnings and transformed into a fashion statement. It was no longer just a woolen cap worn by commoners on Sundays and holidays. It became a versatile accessory, suitable for any day of the week and any occasion. It was embraced by different classes, from farmers to the fashionable elite, each adding their own spin to it, thus ensuring its continued popularity. The flat cap's journey didn't stop there. As the centuries rolled on, it crossed the borders of England and began to make appearances around the globe. In the United States, it found favor among the working class, particularly among the coal miners and steel workers of the early 20th century. In Ireland, it became a staple, symbolizing rural life and heritage. Fast forward to the 21st century, the flat cap has found a new lease on life, thanks to modern pop culture. From actors in period dramas to musicians, and even to the hipsters of today, the flat cap has become a coveted accessory, a nod to the vintage and the retro. It has stood the test of time, adapting to the changing trends and fashions, proving its versatility and timeless appeal. The flat cap, born out of an obscure law from the 16th century, has woven itself into the fabric of global fashion. It has transformed from a mandatory headgear to a symbol of style, its origins almost forgotten. So the next time you see a flat cap, remember its origins, a testament to a quirky law from the 16th century. From a law to a fashion statement, the journey of the flat cap is as unique as it is fascinating. In the late 16th century, a peculiar law came into effect. All non-noble Englishmen over the age of 6 were compelled to wear a woolen flat cap on Sundays and holidays, an unusual tactic employed by Parliament to bolster a struggling domestic wool industry. Though the law was repealed after 26 years, the love for woolen hats had been firmly established. The law's impact had far outlived its enforcement, and the flat cap became more than just a piece of headgear. It symbolized individuality and became a fashion statement that endures till today. That's the story of the flat cap, a symbol of a time when laws shaped fashion. Until next time, keep exploring the quirks of history.